What happens when a seemingly innocent late-night interview turns into one of the most uncomfortable moments in television history? Tonight, we're diving deep into the explosive confrontation between Blake Lively and Seth Meyers that had everyone talking. Before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really triggered this whole situation. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one, because what starts as typical celebrity banter quickly spirals into something none of us saw coming. The Late Night with Seth Meyers studio had that familiar energy, the kind you get when everything seems perfectly orchestrated. Blake Lively walked onto the set with her usual confidence, that megawatt smile lighting up the room as the audience erupted in applause. Seth stood up from behind his desk, extending his hand as she approached. "Blake Lively, everybody," Seth announced to the crowd, his voice carrying that practiced enthusiasm that late-night hosts perfect over years of interviewing. "Thank you so much for being here tonight." "Thanks for having me, Seth," Blake replied, settling into the guest chair with practiced ease. Her voice had that warm, familiar tone that had charmed audiences for years. "I love being on the show." Seth returned to his seat, shuffling through his note cards with a grin. "So, Blake, I have to start by saying congratulations on all your recent projects. You've been incredibly busy lately, and I know our audience is dying to hear about what you've been working on." Blake nodded, crossing her legs and leaning slightly forward. "Thank you. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. Honestly, I've been fortunate to work on some really meaningful projects recently, and I'm excited to share them with everyone." "Now, I have to ask," Seth continued, his tone shifting slightly, becoming more conversational. "There's been a lot of talk lately about actors taking on more control over their projects, becoming producers, really shaping the narrative. Is that something you've been thinking about?" The question seemed innocent enough, but there was something in the way Seth asked it, a subtle edge that Blake seemed to pick up on immediately. Her smile flickered for just a moment before returning to full brightness. "Well, I think any actor worth their salt wants to be involved in the creative process," she said carefully. "It's about finding projects that speak to you personally, not just professionally." Seth nodded, but his expression was more focused now, less of the easygoing demeanor he'd started with. Right. But I'm curious about the business side of things. There have been some reports about, shall we say, creative differences on some of your recent projects." The atmosphere in the studio shifted slightly. Blake's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly, but she maintained her composure. "I'm sorry. What reports are you referring to exactly?" "Oh, you know how it is," Seth said with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hollywood loves its rumors, but there have been some industry whispers about on-set tensions, disagreements about direction, that sort of thing." Blake's smile became more fixed, less natural. "Seth, I think you might be confusing me with someone else. My sets are actually known for being pretty collaborative environments." "Are they, though?" Seth pressed, leaning forward slightly. "Because I've heard from some pretty reliable sources that there have been some, how do I put this delicately, heated discussions about creative control." The audience was starting to sense the shift in energy. What had begun as typical celebrity small talk was taking on a more confrontational tone. Blake's media training was kicking in, but you could see her working to maintain her pleasant demeanor. "I'm really not sure what you're getting at," Blake said, her voice maintaining its warmth, but with a slight edge creeping in. "If you have specific questions about my work, I'm happy to discuss that. But I don't really engage with gossip or unnamed sources." Seth chuckled, but it was the kind of laugh that suggested he wasn't backing down. "Come on, Blake. We're all friends here. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation about the realities of working in this industry. And I'm trying to have a professional conversation about my actual work," Blake responded, her tone becoming more clipped. "Not whatever rumors or speculation you might have heard." The tension was becoming palpable now. Seth's questions weren't following the usual late-night playbook of softball questions and easy laughs. There was an agenda here, something driving the conversation in a direction that Blake clearly hadn't anticipated. "Look," Seth said, setting down his note cards and looking directly at her. "I think our audience appreciates authenticity. They want to know what it's really like behind the scenes, not just the polished PR version." Blake's eyes flashed, and for the first time since sitting down, her composure cracked slightly. "And I think your audience deserves better than tabloid journalism disguised as entertainment." The studio fell unusually quiet. Even the audience seemed to sense that something was going off script. Seth's expression hardened and Blake sat back in her chair, her arms crossing defensively. That's interesting that you'd characterize legitimate questions about your professional conduct as tabloid journalism, Seth replied coolly. Professional conduct? Blake's voice rose slightly, genuine surprise and anger mixing in her tone. What exactly are you accusing me of, Seth? The confrontation was escalating rapidly, and both host and guest seemed to be abandoning any pretense of the typical late-night interview format. What had started as awkward was quickly becoming something much more serious. Seth leaned back in his chair, clearly not intimidated by Blake's rising anger. I'm not accusing you of anything, Blake. I'm asking you to address some legitimate concerns that have been raised about your behavior on set. Concerns? Blake's voice was sharp now, all pretense of media-trained politeness evaporating. What concerns? From who? Whom? Well, there have been reports from crew members, other actors, people who have worked with you recently, Seth said, his tone maddeningly calm in contrast to Blake's growing agitation. Stories about unreasonable demands, last-minute script changes, general difficult behavior. Blake stared at him for a long moment, her jaw clenched. This is unbelievable. You invited me on your show to ambush me with anonymous gossip. I invited you on my show to have an honest conversation, Seth replied, something that seems to be challenging for you. The audience was completely silent now, the usual late-night energy replaced by an uncomfortable tension that seemed to fill the entire studio. Blake's hands were gripping the arms of her chair, and her carefully maintained composure was crumbling by the second. Honest conversation, Blake laughed, but there was no humor in it. You call repeating unsubstantiated rumors an honest conversation? That's not journalism, Seth. That's character assassination. So, you're denying that there have been any issues on your recent projects. Seth pressed, clearly not willing to let this go. No conflicts with directors, no complaints from fellow cast members? I'm denying your right to sit here and attack my reputation based on nameless sources and industry gossip, Blake shot back. If someone has an issue with my work, they can address it with me directly, not whisper about it to late-night talk show hosts. Seth's expression grew more serious, and he leaned forward again. Blake, I think you're being defensive about some pretty straightforward questions. The entertainment industry talks, and when multiple people are saying the same things about someone, it's worth discussing. Multiple people? Blake's voice was incredulous. Now, who are these multiple people? Give me names, Seth. If you're going to sit here and destroy my reputation on national television, have the courage to tell me who's making these accusations. You know I can't reveal my sources, Seth replied smoothly. But the pattern of behavior that's been described is concerning. Showing up late, being unprepared, making unreasonable demands about everything from catering to camera angles. Blake stood up abruptly, her chair rolling back slightly. This is absolutely insane. You're describing someone I don't even recognize. I have never in 15 years of working in this industry behaved in any way that could be described as unprofessional. Sit down, Blake, Seth said firmly. We're in the middle of an interview. Are we? Blake remained standing, her voice rising. Because this feels a lot more like a public lynching than an interview. When exactly did late-night television become a platform for spreading malicious rumors? Seth's composure finally cracked slightly, irritation flashing across his face. Look, if you can't handle legitimate questions about your professional reputation, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews at all. Legitimate questions? Blake's voice was reaching a dangerous pitch. There is nothing legitimate about what you're doing right now. This is a hit job, pure and simple. The tension in the studio was unbearable now. Audience members were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether they should be watching what felt like a very public meltdown. Seth tried to regain control of the situation. Blake, I understand you're upset, but if you could just address the specific allegations, we can move past this and talk about your actual projects. No, Blake said firmly, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. We cannot move past this. You don't get to ambush someone with character assassination and then suggest we just change the subject when it gets uncomfortable. I'm not ambushing anyone, Seth insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. These are questions that other journalists are asking. I'm just asking them directly. Other journalists? Blake laughed bitterly. What other journalists? The ones writing for celebrity gossip blogs? The ones who get paid by the click for manufacturing drama? Those are your sources. Seth's jaw tightened. My sources are people within the industry who have worked with you and have expressed concerns about your behavior. Then let them express those concerns to my face, Blake snapped. Don't hide behind the anonymity of a late-night television interview. If someone has a problem with me, they can address it directly. Maybe the reason they haven't addressed it directly is because you're not exactly approachable when it comes to criticism, Seth suggested, his tone becoming more pointed. Blake's eyes widened in disbelief. Are you serious right now? You're psychoanalyzing me based on rumors. This is beyond unprofessional. Seth, this is actually cruel. I'm trying to understand why multiple people would independently describe similar patterns of behavior if there wasn't some truth to it, Seth replied. Because people love to tear down successful women, Blake said, her voice shaking with anger. Because it's easier to believe that a woman who speaks up for herself or has opinions about her work is difficult rather than professional. Seth's expression hardened at Blake's accusation. Oh, so now this is about gender. That's convenient, Blake. When you can't address the actual allegations, just play the victim card. The words hung in the air like a slap. Blake's face went pale, then flushed with rage. Victim card? Are you kidding me right now? I'm just saying that maybe, just maybe, the reason people are having issues with you isn't because you're a woman, but because you're actually difficult to work with, Seth continued, his voice dripping with condescension. Blake took a step closer to his desk, her entire body radiating fury. You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. None. You sit behind this desk every night making jokes and kissing up to celebrities. And you think that gives you some insight into what it's actually like to work in this industry as a woman. I think it gives me enough insight to recognize deflection when I see it, Seth shot back. Instead of addressing any of the specific concerns that have been raised, you're trying to make this about sexism. Because it is about sexism. Blake exploded. When a male actor has strong opinions about his projects, he's called passionate and dedicated. When a woman does the same thing, she's difficult and demanding. This is basic stuff. Seth rolled his eyes, which only seemed to infuriate Blake further. Come on, Blake. That's such a tired argument. Maybe people are calling you difficult because you actually are difficult. Based on what evidence? Blake demanded. Anonymous sources, unnamed crew members, industry whispers. You have literally nothing concrete, but you're willing to destroy someone's reputation on national television based on gossip. The evidence is the pattern, Seth insisted. When multiple independent sources describe the same behavior, it suggests there's truth to it. Multiple independent sources, Blake repeated mockingly. You keep saying that like it means something. How do you know they're independent? How do you know they're credible? How do you know they even exist? Seth's composure slipped further. Are you suggesting I'm making this up? I'm suggesting that you're repeating gossip without any verification whatsoever, Blake said, her voice sharp and clear. And you're doing it to generate controversy and boost ratings at my expense. That's ridiculous, Seth protested, but his tone suggested he knew he was losing ground. Is it like challenged? When was the last time you ambushed a male guest like this? When was the last time you spent an entire interview grilling a man about his supposed difficult behavior based on anonymous sources? Seth opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, clearly struggling to come up with an answer. Exactly, Blake continued. Because this is what we do to women in this industry. We tear them down for having standards, for speaking up, for refusing to just smile and nod and be grateful for whatever scraps they're thrown. You're being dramatic, Seth said, but his voice lacked conviction. Dramatic. Blake's laugh was sharp and bitter. I'm being dramatic for defending myself against baseless accusations, for refusing to sit here quietly while you assassinate my character on television. The audience was completely silent, many looking deeply uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. This had gone far beyond awkward into genuinely disturbing territory. Look, Seth said, attempting to regain control. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we take a step back and talk about your upcoming projects? No, Blake said firmly. We're not taking a step back. We're not changing the subject. You open this door, Seth. And now we're going to walk through it. Blake, please sit down, Seth tried again, his voice taking on a placating tone that only seemed to anger her more. Don't you dare patronize me, she snapped. Don't sit there and tell me to calm down after spending the last 10 minutes trying to destroy my career. I wasn't trying to destroy anything, Seth protested weakly. I was just asking questions. Loaded questions based on unverified gossip, Blake corrected. There's a difference between journalism and character assassination. And what you've done tonight crosses that line. Seth looked genuinely rattled now, glancing toward his producers off camera, as if seeking guidance on how to handle the situation that had spiraled completely out of his control. I think maybe we should take a commercial break, he suggested. Oh, now you want a break? Blake's voice was filled with contempt. After you've already said what you wanted to say, after you've already planted seeds of doubt about my professionalism in the minds of your viewers. That wasn't my intention, Seth said quietly. Your intention doesn't matter, Blake replied coldly. What matters is what you've done, and what you've done is use your platform to spread malicious gossip about someone who trusted you enough to come on your show. The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence, both host and guest staring at each other across a divide that seemed impossible to bridge. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Blake broke it, her voice eerily calm. Now, you know what the really sad part is, Seth? I actually respected you. I thought you were better than this. Seth shifted in his chair, clearly struggling with how to respond. Blake, maybe I could have approached this differently. Maybe. Blake's eyebrows shot up. Maybe you could have approached character assassination differently? That's your big revelation. I was trying to address legitimate industry concerns, Seth said. But even he seemed to realize how weak that sounded. No, you were trying to create a moment, Blake said, her voice cutting through his excuse. You were trying to generate a viral clip, something that would get people talking about your show, and you decided to do it at my expense. Seth looked genuinely shaken. That wasn't the goal here. Wasn't it? Blake challenged. Then explain to me why you chose to ambush me with gossip instead of asking about my actual work. Explain why you decided to make this interview about tearing me down instead of building up the projects I'm here to promote. These are questions that people are asking, Seth stammered. What people? Blake demanded. Your producers? Your writers? Random people on social media? Because I guarantee you that the people who actually matter in this industry, the people who work with me, who hire me, who trust me with their projects, they're not asking these questions. Seth looked toward his production team again, clearly desperate for some kind of lifeline, but none came. He was on his own with this disaster he had created. Blake, I think we should probably wrap this up, he said quietly. Oh, we're definitely wrapping this up, Blake agreed, her voice filled with cold fury. But not the way you want to. She turned to face the audience directly, her posture straightening as she addressed them with the confidence of someone who had found her footing again. I want to say something to everyone watching tonight, she began, her voice clear and strong. What you've witnessed here is exactly why so many actors, especially women, are afraid to speak up in this industry. Because we know that the moment we advocate for ourselves, the moment we have standards or expectations, will be labeled as difficult. The audience was riveted now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Seth invited me here tonight under false pretenses, Blake continued. He told my team this would be a standard promotional interview for my upcoming projects. Instead, he used his platform to spread unsubstantiated rumors and attack my character. Seth tried to interrupt. Blake, I never intended to. Don't. Blake cut him off sharply, not even looking in his direction. You've said enough. She turned back to the audience. This is what passes for journalism in entertainment media these days. Anonymous sources, unverified claims, and character assassination disguised as legitimate questioning. The camera operator seemed unsure where to focus, cutting between Blake's impassioned speech and Seth's increasingly uncomfortable expression. I've been working in this industry for 15 years, Blake continued. In that time, I've worked with hundreds of people, actors, directors, producers, crew members. My reputation speaks for itself, and it's built on professionalism, dedication, and respect for the craft. Seth made one last attempt to salvage the situation. Blake, I understand you're upset, but maybe we could find a way to end this on a more positive note. Blake finally turned to look at him, and the contempt in her eyes was withering. Positive note? You think after what you've done here tonight, we're going to end this with a hug and a laugh? You think I'm going to pretend this was just a misunderstanding? I just think that maybe we could find some common ground, Seth said weakly. The only common ground we have, Blake said, her voice deadly quiet, is that we both now know exactly who you really are. She began removing her microphone, her movements deliberate and controlled. And for the record, Seth, the next time you want to ambush someone with baseless accusations, maybe make sure you're prepared for them to fight back. Seth watched helplessly as she unclipped the microphone pack from her dress. Blake, please let's not end it like this. You ended it like this the moment you decided to attack my reputation instead of doing your job, Blake replied, dropping the microphone onto the chair she had been sitting in. She turned to address the audience one final time. Thank you for listening tonight. I hope you'll remember this the next time you hear anonymous rumors about anyone in the entertainment industry. Sometimes the people spreading those rumors have their own agenda. With that, Blake Lively walked off the set, her heels clicking against the floor in the otherwise silent studio. Seth sat frozen behind his desk, staring after her, the weight of what had just happened settling over everyone present. The cameras continued rolling for several more seconds, capturing Seth's stunned expression as he realized his interview had turned into one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. And that's exactly what happened when a routine promotional interview became an explosive confrontation that no one saw coming. What do you think triggered Seth's aggressive approach? Was Blake justified in her response, or should she have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns of Hollywood's most dramatic moments.